There you go.
Okay, so hello everybody. I gotta get rid of a little thing on the front of my screen here. So I just want to make sure I'm doing it right here, Sal. So on my screen, there's a little Zoom frame that's come up. It says this meeting is being recorded by a host or participant. And there's a little got it. Do I just press
Yeah, you
that?
click on to got it. Everybody has to accept that it's being recorded. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. All righty. So everyone can see, is this on for everybody? Good.
Yeah.
Okay. Just to start off first, I'm at another location other than my home because my home doesn't have a real strong internet connection. So I'm at a dear friend's place, Rich Peterson and Casey Foley, who are very active San Joaquin Audubon people, and they're dear friends. And so I'm actually at their place using their internet connection. And so hopefully there'll be no glitches. I learned a long time ago that when I started doing Zoom things at my home, there would sometimes be a glitch and I'd actually lose and the connection and have to spend that whatever amount of time to get back on. But so hopefully there won't be any problems here. So I want to just say that from the get-go that I am at a different place and I'm very confident that the internet connection should be good. And I want to thank Sal and all of Sanos Audubon for letting me come on and speak to you folks. Before I get started with the program, I just want to say that I personally have a very Sanos Audubon, it holds a close place in my heart, only from a standpoint that I remember when Stanislaus Audubon was very, very young. Because when I came out of college and got involved with San Joaquin Audubon back in the 70s, Stanislaus Audubon was quite small too, and we've had a kind of a connection there. And I remember way back then when I was really beginning to bird San Joaquin County a lot, I would go into Stanislaus County because there just wasn't a lot of presence there. And I remember running into Eric Kane and birding Stanislaus County with Eric before there was very many other people there, and having a real good time with that, and remember going to the Modesto sewage ponds when very few birders were there. But then I know it's a very different thing now with all of you, especially with people like Harold and Jim and everyone, Sal. But I remember those days fondly, and I'm very, very happy to see that Stanislaus Audubon is a very, very, thriving group with a lot of very active birders, and has done a lot for the birds and birding of Stanislaus Audubon. And I don't think I've ever spoken to you folks, and I haven't done anything formally with Stanislaus Audubon in a very, very long time. So thank you for allowing me to be with you. So I'm just going to kind of get started on the program here. And as you can see, it's the title is My Favorite Bird Is. And the reason why I came up with this program, I'll be very honest how this thing came into being, was it's a program I've been thinking about doing for a very long time, because I get asked that question, number one, far and away, above all birding questions, is when people find out that I'm a birder, and they're not a birder, just anyone, someone I'm meeting for the first time, or even a longtime friend, they will do this. What's your favorite bird? It's kind of their way of wanting to enter into my little world a little bit. And I get it. People know that I'm a football fan. The first thing they ask is, who's your team? It must be, and they'll say it, football, if you're a pro football fan, you're a 49er fan. I go, yes. And then off you go. Oh, too bad they lost last week, and and you have a lot of you can engage in this conversation. Is like if you ask that, and people can kind of do that. And so I think that is why they will ask, what is your favorite bird? Not knowing, it's not like asking, who is your favorite baseball team? Because if I say the San Francisco Giants, they go, oh, I'm a Dodger fan, boo to you, and off we go. If I say my favorite bird is an Anna's hummingbird, and then they kind of give me this blank look. Hummingbirds. I go, yeah, Anna's hummingbird. There's 300 different kinds of hummingbirds. My favorite one is an Anna's hummingbird. Oh, and then you can tell it's like, why did I ask that question? Because they don't know how to respond to it. And if I give them that response, and I've come to understand that the reason why they ask that question is a little bit like when I ask a person, who is your favorite baseball player? It's so I can engage in it. And people think they can engage in a birding thing. For whatever reason, it's like, oh, what's your favorite bird? And then they realize, why did I ask that question? I know nothing about birds. Until I learned, I said, one of my favorite birds is a bird that I studied in college. And they go, oh, what's that? See, then that's what they're looking for. What they're looking for is that response is, oh, you went to college. Where'd you go to college? I went to UC Santa Cruz. Oh, I love Santa Cruz. And then they're talking about that. And then it takes a little while to get back to the bird question. By the way, you asked me what my favorite bird is. While I was there, I studied Anna's hummingbirds. Oh, really? But really, the connection is more about Santa Cruz. And, oh, you went to school there. Oh, you're a biology major. See, and I'm realizing that's what they're really asking is they're using the bird thing to get some to know about me. And that's kind of what you do when you're asking a question about who is your favorite baseball player. It's like, if I want to know, are you a Dodger fan? And and if you are, I'm all over you, right? Or are you a Giants fan? Boom, yeah. My favorite player, is right now is was Hunter Pence. I was going, oh, I love Hunter Pence, and off we go, and we can talk about that. And hey, let's go to a Giants game next week, something like that. So I've become real aware of that when a person asks, "What's your favorite bird?" And I've now come to be prepared with a response that will kind of engage them because they really want to know more about me more than what my favorite bird is. And so it's really what they're asking is kind of what Barbara said is, David, what's the difference between a favorite bird and a spark bird? And that's really what it's about. It's the person is not asking what my favorite bird is. They're wanting to know about the spark birds in my life. And that's what this program is going to be about. It's going to be about the spark birds in my life. And it's something that I'm hoping that will help you to understand a little bit who I am. And more than anything, maybe it'll help you to think about your own spark birds in a way that when someone asks you about your birds and birdings and stuff like that, that it will be a way to engage them into who you are and why you like birds and birding so much. So that's what this is going to be about. So my favorite bird is, and obviously I live here in San Joaquin County and live right there to Woodbridge Road and Santo crane. How can Santo crane not be one of my favorite birds? I love Santo cranes, and I always have to do this. It takes a while for me to get this thing to advance when it's been on for a while. There it is. Acorn woodpecker, a swallow, American robin, Yale rump warbler, California scrub jay, ginger, Marianne, ginger. No, it's really Jeannie. It goes on and on and on. And yeah, I was a preteen when those shows came on in the 60s. And I was a big fan of I Dream of Jeannie with Larry Hagman and Barbara Eden. And I was even a bigger fan of Gilligan's Island. And I adored Ginger and Marianne, Tina Louise and Dawn Wells there. And I don't know if you knew that Dawn Wells passed. Dawn Wells was my favorite. So Marianne was my favorite. And she passed away just 2 years ago. She caught COVID right after COVID got going in 2020 and tragically passed away from COVID. But just for those of you that I'm going to age myself, and for those of you that know this stuff, Gilligan was played by, can I do the pointer? Can you see the pointer moving across my finger?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, good. So Gilligan was played by Bob Denver. Thurston Howell III was played by Jim Backus. Do we all remember what Gilligan or Bob Denver did before he played Gilligan? Come on, of course you do.
No.
Maynard G. Krebs, the
That's right.
beatnik on Dobie Gillis. I watched that show. I was tiny, but I remember it. My wife Sue loved the show. Maynard G. Krebs, the beatnik on Dobie Gillis. I think it was a late 50s thing, so I'm that old. And of course, Jim Backus was the voice of my favorite Mr. Magoo. So just some trivia. It was Roger Troy Peterson that kind of came up with the term the spark bird, I do believe. He is one of my favorite birders. I got a chance to meet Roger. I like to say that we were almost on first name basis. We just had the opportunity to meet each other quite a few times at bird festivals before he passed away. And he's just an amazing person. I got to know him a little bit. I love his artwork. I love his field guides. He's was David Sibley before David Sibley, where he did it all. And he was asked, "What is your favorite bird?" I mean, this is a man that has traveled around the world. He probably saw most of the birds in existence at 10,000 plus before he passed away. And so to ask him what his favorite bird is, it's like, well, let me see. I illustrated all these bird books, the creator of the Peterson Field Guide series, and an amazing illustrator. I love his illustrations, by the way, and, flamingos and the thing from the American tropics with trogons and tanagers. And to ask him what his favorite bird is was tough. And he would kind of think about it. And he was also known as King Penguin because he really had a love affair with penguins, and was an amazing photographer. And this book here is his photographic guide to penguins, and really loved penguins and had the nickname of King Penguin. And so he was asked, is penguins, the King Penguin, one of your favorite birds? And he goes, well, let me tell you a bird that I really, really like. And then he goes, when I was young, before I got into birding, there was this woodpecker of some kind just laying down at the base of this tree. He says, I was a child, and I thought it was either dead or dying. And he says, I approached it, and all of a sudden it got up. And he said, oh my gosh, look at this thing. It's quite attractive. And then it took off. And he said, the flash of yellow changed his life. He says it just did something to him. He said it went from a dead bird, what he thought was dead, it got up, and it's attractive with these browns and blacks and a little bit of red. And then it took off, and he saw this, and he said he spent the rest of his life trying to capture the beauty of the yellow-shafted flicker, and said that he may have illustrated the yellow-shafted flicker more than any bird ever, because he said it just was such a pivotal point in his life where he saw this thing just come to life. And the yellow of the yellow-shafted flicker kind of said that to him. Life, this bird that he thought was dead, came to life, and the yellow is what really just said, oh my gosh, this bird is alive. And he wanted to capture that. And he says it just caught him. He says, that is the bird that just changed my life. It was a spark bird. And he says there's a lot of other birds in his life that did that. But when he was asked about those birds, he says it was a bird or a birding experience that really meant something to him. The spark bird. And the first spark bird in his life was yellow-shafted flicker. My spark bird. Story goes, especially if you ask my mom, who's 98, saw today. Story goes is that when I was very young, child, 5, 6, I was apparently, I knew this, very into nature of all kinds. I just was a nature boy. And again, I'm almost 70, so we're talking back in the 50s, so long time ago, ancient. And my parents bought me this little series, the little golden series of books, field guides to different things, and mammals, fish, fossils, butterflies. The big one was the stars one. See that number, the second one there from the right. And I really got into stargazing as a child. I knew the constellations way better than I know them today. I would spend just hours outside after the sun went down. And the story is, whenever the family got together, it's going to be an astronaut. You know how that goes. He loves astronomy. All he does is go outside and spends more time outside after the sun goes down than when the sun is up. He loves stargazing. And yeah, but I loved all forms of life, but I was really well known for loving, just stars, astronomy. And yeah, I just remember I want to be an astronaut. When I was 10, so we're talking about 1963, 1964. Oops. My parents, and there's my parents, for my Christmas, bought me this telescope. And on Christmas Day, I was pointing it out our living room window. This is obviously not Christmas Day because you see all the green leaves. It's just kind of a shot I took off the internet. It was something like this. It looked kind of like this. And we lived in North Stockton at the time. And I pointed the telescope across the road to our neighbor's house. And I look in there and I'm putting in the eyepiece. And there is this bird in the telescope. And I was like, wow, there is a bird in the telescope as I'm trying to get to know this telescope. And it just stood there, just like this. And I went over and go, Mom, Dad, come over here, look at this thing. And the bird was still there. And they all looked and they go, wow, David, that's something. It's what is it? I go, I don't know. I have no idea. I have no idea what this is. I think it's some kind of a woodpecker. And so I went to my little library with the golden field guides and pulled out the bird book. And this is the one. And it got dilapidated just like this as the years went by. And I was able to find in the golden field guide, when I was 10, acorn woodpecker. Changed my life. I just was so amazed that I could do that. It was like, I'm Einstein. I'm a genius. I can do this. And as a child, it was. I remember it to this day. It's like, how did I do that? No teacher, no parental guidance. I just kind of, and I'm going, a live bird, and I have found it in my field guide. And of course, this is way before the internet. I'm alone. I'm just all by myself, which I was until I went to college. I didn't even know other birders existed for 8 years. I was just all by myself, and it was a big deal. And the fact that I was able to put a name to this bird in this field guide, I go, this is the best. I never used that telescope again to look at, everything changed. I used it, I think I did a little bit, but my parents remember it, I never again used that telescope to look at stars, the moon. They said I went from looking at things at night to looking things at day. That same day, Christmas morning, I go, Mom, can I go over to Mrs. Moore's house? David, it's Christmas morning. Oh, just for a little bit? Can I just go for a little bit? Well, she goes, let me call her. She calls Mrs. Moore, and she says, you can come on over. My mom goes up to the closet where my brother and I were to never go, and she pulls down these very Nikon binoculars that were given to her by her father. So my grandfather brought these back from Japan, and she put them around my neck and said, you can go over there and use the binoculars that I'm supposed to never touch. And I go, wow, Mom. I go over there. Mrs. Moore is there to meet me at her backyard gate. The first bird I see, I'm talking the first bird I see is a hummingbird. And it's probably just because I was looking for it. It's not like I wasn't around hummingbirds. It's just I was looking for birds. And this hummingbird is in her yard on Christmas Day, sitting on this perch. I'm going, oh my gosh. And I go, I'm fine, Mrs. Moore. She goes, okay, have fun. And she went into her house. It was obviously a nice day. I was able to find this bird in that same field guide. I knew it was an Anna's hummingbird. I was able to figure out after about 30 minutes of watching this bird hover around that it's the only bird that could be there at that time. And I think back on that, I'm going, I was able to figure that out. Obviously, I just got into it. I just was looking over that little paragraph over and over and over and said, it has to be an Anna's hummingbird. And then I remember seeing this bird, again, 1964. So it was Audubon's warbler still in that guide. Myrtle and Audubon's were split still. And I was able to figure it out. I mean, I remember to this day, I have a little mark in that guide circled. I was able to identify an Audubon's warbler. Those are the big three. 2 hours later, my mom is like coming to the door, David, what are you doing? I found 3 birds. I found 3 birds in 2 hours. I just got engrossed with those 3 birds. Acorn woodpecker, Audubon's warbler, and a hummingbird. It was over. It was over. That's all I was doing. I was obsessed. Acorn woodpecker was that spark bird for me. Acorn woodpecker is still a favorite bird. A lot of stories about acorn woodpeckers. The best one I like to say these days is it was right before the pandemic. I think it was like 2018, 2019. I get a call from Kimball Garrett, the Kimball Garrett from Southern California, LA Audubon, just retired from being the collections manager at the LA Museum of Natural History. And I get a call from Kimball and he says, David, do you know where there is right now a colony of acorn woodpeckers that people can come and see easily in the Stockton area? I go, I sure do. I know 3. And he goes, wonderful. I go, why do you ask? He says, because the equivalent to the National Geographic Society of Japan is flying into LAX in a couple of days, and they want to do a documentary on acorn woodpecker. And I go, well, you must know where there's acorn woodpeckers. He goes, I do, but I want to back up just in case the colony that I'm going to take them to is either not there or there's restrictions and I can't get them into it. And they're willing to travel wherever to see a good colony of acorn woodpeckers. I go, I got several right here in the Stockton area. And he says, if you don't hear from me in a couple of days, don't worry about it. I didn't hear from him, so obviously it went fine. But what this Japanese crew was doing is that they were wanting to document what is now one of the more amazing things about acorn woodpeckers is that wherever their granaries are, they form a colony. And these colonies are long-standing, and they are formed around the breeding of the acorn woodpeckers. They're very colonial. And, these granaries can be immense, and they're just amazing into themselves. But the whole colonial breeding habits of acorn woodpeckers is something very unique. It's not only unique among woodpeckers, it's unique among almost all colonial birds in the world. It's yet to be understood exactly what's going on with them, but when they nest together, they apparently will share, many females, up to 3, will share a nest hole and lay all their eggs in there. So there can be like about 15 eggs from 3 different females in a nest hole. So it's like the original, daycare center in there, and they all hatch out. And all 3 pairs are feeding all these babies inside this big menagerie of acorn woodpeckers. And there's just a lot of studies going on what's going on there. The biggest is, how do they not interbreed with one another? How do individuals inside there know who their sibling is? Because they apparently do know it. And so it's just an interesting thing. It's an ongoing study that's going on. One of the biggest acorn woodpecker studies that goes on currently. Of course, it's Hastings Reserve up in Upper Carmel Valley, related to UC Berkeley. And I think that team did eventually, that Japanese group did come up to there. But again, ongoing studies, an amazing thing about the acorn woodpecker, a bird that I love, but a bird that also, an acorn that I love, a bird that I'm very fond of, but a bird that also has an amazing natural history. Anyway, something that's kind of very, very special. And well, acorn woodpecker is one of our own. It's, you know, one of their big strongholds still is right here in the Central Valley. In 1969, and by now I'm 15, and I had all this big interest, of course, in the stars and everything like that. I was a big fan, of course, of the of landing on the moon. The whole 60s, I was caught up in that a lot. I remember watching it to this day, the moon landing, the whole thing. It's something that was a big thing for me at the time, and it would have been, I think, would have been no big for anybody. But because I was so into it as a child, I really was into it. In July of 1969, and that was a year that my family, my parents, decided to do a big road trip across the country. And went as far back as New York. And it's the only time I've ever been to New York to actually do the New York thing, the Washington, D.C. thing. I've never done it again, unfortunately, but I did do it at that time when I was like a sophomore in high school. What I remember a lot about that is I was 15 and my dad said, we should have went next year when David was 16 so he could help drive. And because my dad got so tired a lot and he was sure wish I could drive. But that was a major trip for the family and for me. And I remember I had a lot of birds I was wanting to see by then. And a lot of those birds mean something to me today. Here the family is my dad, my younger brother, my mom, and we went, that was at Boston Lake where we went out trout fishing and caught all these amazing birds. I mean, amazing fish. We just loaded down. We just caught a lot. I remember that a lot. Special time. On that trip, of course, I saw a lot of the to be expected birds that I wanted to see, like, you know, northern cardinal, the blue jay, but I had some target birds. And one of the big target birds was this bird, was the purple martin. And the reason why I really wanted to see this bird was when I was about 12, since I had became such a bird lover, a bird watcher, a birder, there was my parents never lacked for gifts for me. It's like whatever bird book they could get their hands on, it was a gift for me, and I loved them all. And one of the most interesting bird books they got for me was this book, The Purple Martin, the story of the purple martin, America's most wanted bird. And it was highlighting their ability to eat so many insects. This was right during the post-Silent Spring era by Rachel Carson. So where they were wanting to talk about, you know, birds being a natural predator on insects, so we don't have to use so much, you know, pesticides, and how to attract them and get them into your yard. And so read this book and read that, you know, one of the best birdhouses that you could get for attracting purple martins that would also kind of discourage starling was this thing. And I ordered this. Mom, Dad, I want this. And and I told them why, and they go, okay. And I remember it coming in the mail, this big monstrosity. I, you know, again, was about 12, 13. And I remember my dad and I worked on this, put it together. It was a real big father-son bonding time. I'll never forget it. This, you know, condominium for attracting purple martins. And we put it up. This is not a real photo of what we did in the backyard, but it was just like this, you know, put it up on a big pole. My dad got that metal pole and poured the concrete in, and up this thing went. And you know, the year goes by, another year goes by. I don't get nothing in. Don't get house sparrows, no starlings, and for sure did not get any purple martins in North Stockton. And I was going, wow, how disappointing. What are we doing wrong? And so when we went on this trip, I really wanted to see purple martins. And boy, did I see purple martins. Saw purple martins as soon as we went east of the Rockies, everywhere. And they were using the exact same bird, you know, condominium that I had purchased. We saw them there, and I was going, look at them. I was so excited, and like seeing the bird, but also was like, look at them, look at them. They're using it. It does work. I mean, purple martins by the jillions, they were just everywhere back east, and people, building, having these amazing houses for them and just attracting them like crazy. And I'll never forget it. I'll never forget going to Michigan, Lake Michigan, to seeing some people that kind of helped raise my dad when he came from China. Pentwater, Michigan, right there on the shore of Lake Michigan. And they had all these purple martins nesting in these gourds. I was going, they'll nest in anything. It's like, why am I not getting them at home? And I'll never forget, I'm going, maybe when we go home, there'll be some purple martins in the birdhouse. And I'll never forget this. My mother goes, David, have you ever seen purple martins before? Back home? I go, never. I've never seen, this is the first time I'm seeing purple martins. And she goes, and you're seeing them everywhere. And they're just common and nesting in all these, little gourds and these houses that people put up. And my mother just using common sense, mother wisdom. Maybe they're not there. And I was going, Mom, maybe you're right. Maybe they're not there. And this was my introduction to the fact that there are different populations of birds. It was, a spark bird moment. It's like, oh, I looked into it. I'll never forget this. I was going, you could be right, Mom. Maybe the purple martins here are not like the ones back home. I mean, the range map shows them there, and I looked into it, and I was able to somehow figure out, without the internet, that the Western purple martins are very different than the ones back east. The ones here in the West do not use historically man-made, people-made houses. They just never adapted to that, and they're much less common, and they look different. This is a pair nesting in a saguaro, down in the Southwest. Look at the female. The females are Western purple martin females are very different than those back east. The ones that they just are much more evenly colored. The females back east, they aren't quite as distinct as ours here in the West, where they have the purple back and the real almost whitish head. Ours are different, and they behave differently. And sure enough, when we got home, there was no purple martin in the purple martin condominium that we had put up. And I learned at that moment that there are different types of birds. They're not all the same around their range. The ones in a certain part of the world are different than another part if they're the same species, especially in a continental thing. And I realized then that no, purple martins here in California are different. And as the years went by, I didn't see my first purple martin in California until I was in my 20s. And I didn't see my first purple martin in San Joaquin County until like about 1995. And the first chaseable purple martins were not seen in San Joaquin County until just a year ago. I mean, for many years, I was the only one that had seen a purple martin in San Joaquin County until just a year ago, last spring, when on an Audubon field trip, we were able to see about 3. That bird is really tough, as we all know, in San Joaquin County. I know there's very few records for Stanislaus County, and the really only ones here kind of that are known nesting in Northern California are the ones in Sacramento. Dan Arola wrote this, was one of the contributors to this proceeding at International Partners in Flight Conference in 2009, addressing the regional decline of purple martins here in California. About 7 years later, Dan Arola became pretty much the guy, along with Don Kopp, about the demise of purple martins, doing all their studies in that Sacramento population of purple martins and seeing the decline that's going on pretty much every year. I think they're stabilizing a little bit in recent years. I think that's the latest word on them. So maybe they are going to kind of hold themselves. But if you haven't seen the purple martins in Old Sac, do get there. It's amazing. That bird has just really declined here in California. Probably should have some kind of status. But and you know, they're in Old Sacramento. They nest in the weep holes underneath I-5 there in Old Sac, and I think some other spots like on, you know, the freeways there, I think on 50 and 80. But you know, you can read about them. The Central Valley Bird Club has a journal called Central Valley Birds, and you can find back issues of that online and read about Dan Arola's and Dan Kopp's comments on Purple Martin. But anyway, a bird that you know, a spark bird for me, a bird that I love and has a lot of now a lot of history here in the valley because of its decline and everything like that. And a bird that I really came to understand, helped me understand about the differences of bird differences, racial differences in bird populations, especially here in North America. On that same trip, we went to South Dakota, Mount Rushmore, and one of the very first birds I saw when we got out of the car was this little guy, a rock wren. I had never seen one. They're they're common in the right habitat here in San Joaquin County, Stanislaus County as well, but I had not seen one up to that point. And there was a rock wren right out the car. I was so stoked. I was going, oh my gosh, look at this bird. I was able to find it in the field guide. By now, I was a pretty good birder. You know, I was 15 years old and was able to find it pretty quick. And I only mentioned this because I went straight to the range. A ranger was there, and it wasn't this ranger. I just took it again off the internet, but this photo reminds me of the ranger back in 1969. And I remember the guy's smile, and I just went up to him. I says, "You a rock wren?" And he came up to me and he said, "You're absolutely right, son." And he says, and he gave me a little piece of paper and he says, "You want to document that?" And I will make sure that it gets into our records. And I was going, really? And I wrote a little thing on there and I gave it to him. Kind of forgot about it. When we got home, there was a postcard addressed to me. And my mom goes, "David, look at this." And it was a postcard from Mount Rushmore. And it was from that ranger. And he said, here is a documented thing showing that you, David Yee, found a rock wren, and it is now archived in our records of birds here at the park. And I'm telling you, for a 15-year-old, that was huge. It helped to really, really hone me into keeping records, encourage me in my birding, was just one more thing that told me this is something that is for me. And rock wrens, whenever I see one, it helps to remind me that, David, you need to pay it forward. Share your love for birds to young people, like that ranger. That was such it was a pivotal point in my life. It just helped me understand that this is something I can do and I can contribute. And it was just one thing. And that postcard in the mail was just a wow moment for me. And it just taught me little things can pave the way for people in their lives. He probably, I don't even remember his name. And he probably totally forgot who I am. But it was a momentous moment in my life. And when we do that for other people, you're changing their life. Never think that whatever little thing you do for, especially a young person, doesn't go unheeded, does not contribute something. It does. It did it for me. Rock wrens will always be a sign of that for me. So bird migration is just something that has always been fascinating to me. And, you know, way back when, one of the most famous bird migration spots known in the world was the one that goes along the east side of the Mediterranean, especially when it goes to Israel, and it kind of goes right here along. Birds are going when they're going north and south from Africa into Europe. They hit the Mediterranean, they go this way, and they go right along here. And one of the most famous spots to see, especially raptor migration, is in Eilat, right there at the north end of the Red Sea, in Israel there. And I always said, one day I'll get there. I haven't got there yet. I do want to. I want to one day. I just love to see the whole, spectacle of 500 million birds passing through. And that's annually. But they just say in a given day, you can just see a lot of birds, especially in spring going through. And so half a billion birds pass through annually there, at least as of about, 8 years ago, 9 years ago. And it is a spectacle, especially for raptors. A lot of birds are moving through there, ibis and storks and passerines, but the raptor migration, as they say, is spectacular. It was always kind of wondered, is something like that occurring in the Americas? And it was only recently that it was kind of found out. The locals knew this, but where, birders kind of found about that right down here in Veracruz, a similar thing is happening. So as birds are migrating, especially south in the fall, they come down, they hit the east side of the Rockies, and they kind of come down and they get pinched right down here south of Texas in the Mexican state of Veracruz. So here's kind of an area right here. You can see the mountain, it's right there. And so you got the Gulf of Mexico here on the east side. This mountain range, which I think is an extension of the Rockies, and it just gets pinched right in this area here. Today it's called the River of Raptor. Some of you may have already done it, already gone there. I've done it twice. The first time I did it was in 1999 when Jim Royer from San Luis Obispo County and I led a field trip, one of the very first field trips for the Western field ornithologists down there. And we arrived about 2 days early before the field trip. And it was amazing to see all the birders that were there. Obviously, there were a lot of American birders and European birders, but I was really amazed. Both Jim and I were really amazed by the number of native birders that were there. It was something that the Mexican people just really, really took hold to. And today, a lot of the leaders for the River Raptor, trips, if you plan something down there, they're all natives. They're all Mexican birders. And it's a great thing. It's something that really supports their economy and it supports them personally. And they're into it and they are really, really good. And so just was loving all of that. Unfortunately, I was on one of those, I was there during one of those days where before the tour started, there had been a 3-day-long big storm that had come off the Caribbean and kind of stall all the birds. You know how that is. So the birds are flying down. A lot of Swainson's hawks, a lot of broadwing hawks, these are, and they got hunkered down because there was this big storm that came in from the south, and then it warmed up. And I remember being out there on that late afternoon. It was like about 3 or 4 in the afternoon. It just warmed up, and it was crazy. The number of broadwing hawks that started to lift up was, I just was stunned. I was going, what is happening? And I remember there was a local Mexican that was there and he spoke perfect English. And he goes, it is the rise of broadwing hawks after they've been grounded by this storm and they're all getting up. And I said, these are all broadwing hawks? And he goes, yes. And in an hour, it was like 360 as far as I could see, just all broadwing hawks. The estimated count, and there's counts going on every day during the fall there, and the estimated count was 1 million. And they get these every once in a while where they get this 1 million bird, 1 million hawk day. And I was there for one of them. It was like, are you kidding me? 1 million? I was going like, how many broadwing hawks are there in the world? 1.7 million. And I was going, you're trying to tell me I am seeing more than half of the world's population at one time? And they go, yes, this is one of those moments. I was flabbergasted. I was going, I can't believe it. It was stunning for me. I count it as one of the top 5 birding experiences in my life. Broad-winged hawk was my favorite bird that day, and for several days. It was just a phenomenal thing, and to this day, whenever I think about it, I still get very excited. If you haven't done it, I encourage you to do it. It's a real neat thing. I think it's safe in Veracruz in Mexico. If you plan to go to Mexico, make sure you know what's going on wherever you're going. But it was just stunning. I'll never forget it. A lot of good groups are going down there. You can connect up with a lot of different tour groups to go down there, and you'll be supporting the native groups down there. I think Pronatura was the one I remember going to. I think they're still very active today, and they do a lot of great conservation for that area of Mexico. So again, just an amazing event. I'll never forget it. Broad-winged hawk is a bird I'll never forget for that reason. If you've been birding long enough, like I have, you'll come across a bird that you'll call the nemesis bird. The nemesis bird, the bird that you just cannot catch up with. And my nemesis bird forever was, of all birds, a rusty blackbird. Relatively, back in the 80s and 90s, relatively common back east. They winter in the southeast. I just never was there during that time. Just never was kind of at the right spot during migration to catch up with a rusty blackbird back east, and chased a lot of rusty blackbirds in California. They're a rare bird here in California. They're very closely related to the Brewer's blackbird. So Brewer's blackbird with that really clear yellow eye, rusty blackbirds, especially in the fall, have that really pretty rough color, especially in the back, around the head, on the rump, and in the tertials. And it's just a bird I just never caught up with. I remember chasing this bird a lot in the 70s and the 80s when I was doing a lot of chasing. When I was younger, I chased a ton of them. I just could not, be there. Oh yeah, you just missed it. One of those kind of things. Point raised. Yeah, there was 2 here. They're gone. And nemesis bird. And I chased this bird so often all over the state. It says, I got to find one locally in San Joaquin County. As you can see here, this is their breeding range. They nest in the wetlands and bogs of the far north, from Alaska all the way across Canada, and then they migrate down to the southeast. Very strange blackbird. No other blackbird, no other member of the blackbird family, including meadowlarks and orioles, does this, where they're really more of a forest bird than they are of a grassland kind of bird. And obviously rare here in the West. They go this way, and so anything that's coming west of the Rockies is going to be a vagrant. And California gets them every year. I just never caught up with one. I just said, I want to find one in San Joaquin County. Well, the first rusty blackbird was found by a birder named George Welch. This is sometime in the mid 80s, and I couldn't find it, and very discouraging. And there weren't a lot of rusty blackbirds being found in the Central Valley. To this day, there are very, very few. I know Stanislaus has one found by Harold Reeve, I believe at the Modesto Sewage Ponds. It was a long time ago, maybe 90s. There's one for Merced, maybe 2, one for Yolo, and then several for San Joaquin. It's a rare, rare bird in the Central Valley. And I'll never forget when my dear friend Waldo Holt found one on the Christmas bird count, Stockton Christmas bird count, sometime in the mid 90s. And David, we get there for the compilation. Rusty blackbird. He didn't have his camera with him at the time, but he illustrated. He was a really good illustrator, and he illustrated. It was a bird that looked just like this. It was found out on Ringe Track, which is one of the islands up in the Delta, just west of Stockton. We went out there in the rain every day for a week to the spot, and could not find it. And Waldo was so disappointed. It was like he just was, because he knew it was a bird I was wanting, and he always felt bad that I found a lot of rare birds and got him on it. And he says, I want this bird for you. And we couldn't find it. I says, well, we'll find me another one. And the years were going by. 95. Before you know it, it's the year 2000. And then in 2005, Waldo came down with cancer, and he just didn't do well. And we lost Waldo in '07. And I'll never forget, during the years he was trying to, get well, he would still say to me, David, I'm gonna get out. I'm gonna find you that rusty blackbird. And I said, Waldo, yeah, we're gonna get it. When you get well, we're gonna get that rusty blackbird. Uh, Waldo passed away in '07, and we never found that rusty blackbird together. And then, wouldn't you know it, as by then it was well known that rusty blackbirds were becoming extremely rare. Something was going on. It really is now kind of a poster bird for the demise of a lot of these neotropical migrants, and we can't really figure out what's going on. So if you Google it right now, there's just a lot of information about it. It's just a bird of mystery. The decline of rusty blackbird, they've lost about 90% of their population in the last 40 years. Not really sure why. Well, I mean, we do know why, but there's no one singular reason. It's kind of the combination thing. Obviously, loss of habitat, draining of the swamps up in the far north. But, there's not a lot of that goes on there. It's mostly down in, southern Canada and here in the United States, where a lot of the draining of their swamps are. But up in where they are nesting, there's not a lot that goes on there, and yet they're in great decline. So, but still habitat loss, pesticides, climate change, and all of the above. It's just, why is this bird in such decline? And, with all of that, I go, wow, I may never catch up with this bird. And and I kind of decided sometime in about maybe 2014 that after reading, the disappearance of the rusty blackbird and its demise, and a lot of people feel that it should have some kind of protection listed, at least maybe threatened, that I said, if I never catch up with the rusty blackbird, and I'll be fine. I'll just remember it always as a bird that Waldo wanted to get from me. And if I never see one again, I'll be perfectly fine by that. And wouldn't you know it, years later, I just go out on one day in February, out my front door into a walnut orchard, and I come across this bird right here. Obviously, one of my photos. These are nice photos off the internet or given to me by someone like Ed Harper. I come across a blackbird in a walnut orchard in the company of about a dozen Brewer's blackbird. And it was one of those, like, there it is. I just knew it immediately. And I said, you stay there while I go back home or back into the house to get my camera. And there it was. It still stayed there. It was very difficult for me to get close to the bird. That's why my photographs are real poor. And it was just like a moment. It was like, wow, here you are. And all the memories of Waldo came back. It was a bird that I was going, are you kidding me? Why now, at this moment, right at my front door? It was so odd. Chasing this bird all over the state, trying to get people to help me see it. Waldo wanted to get it from me. And I finally just says, if I never see it again, I'll be perfectly fine. I walk up my front door, go across the street to a walnut orchard, and I hardly ever bird there. I never birded there. And there is this rusty blackbird. It's a bird that bird is one of my favorite birds of all time. It was a bird that will help me to always remember Waldo. I can't believe it's already been 16 years. It feels like yesterday. I miss him so much. The rusty blackbird was with me. This bird I only saw for about 30 minutes. And then it was gone. I tried to find it again. I called people and we tried to re-find it. And I always go, just like Waldo, here for a very short time, but we'll love it always. Love Waldo, love this rusty blackbird. The last bird I want to talk about is a bird that was one of my favorites when I first started birding as a child, just because I could identify it. White-crowned sparrow. And just, that Christmas day, and one of the birds first birds I was to track in the winter was white-crowned sparrow, and found it again in my little book. There it is in that little golden field guide. Notice how the illustration shows it with a dark lure. I didn't really see the significance of that until about 5-6 years later when I got the Roger Trey Peterson field guide, and then a couple years later when I got the this book, which I used for a long time as well, the Golden Guide. The Golden publishers decided to come out with a real field guide to the birds of North America, and found illustrations both in the Peterson guide and in the Golden Guide showing, I'm sorry, real bad photo, but showing the dark lures and mentioning how our birds here in the West have the pale lures. So this is the ones that we have that winter here in the Central Valley. You go to the coast, or you get the ones that have the yellow bill, but also pale lure, and the ones in the East have the dark lures. And I kind of realized that again when I was about 15 or 16, and I said, wow, I want to see one of those dark lured white-crowned sparrows. I guess I got to go back east to see one. And then I was about a sophomore in high school, or sophomore in college, so I was about 20, when I took a trip up to the Sierra, and boom, there is a bird there with the dark lures. And again, just beginning to learn how the distribution of different races of our birds is something that I didn't know about. That we do have a dark lured representative of the white-crowned sparrow, Oriantha, that is a mountain breeder, breeds in the Rockies and also breeds in the Sierra. And I said, wow, there is one there. Where does it go in the winter? Well, it turns out it goes down to Mexico. So here is the range of the 5 different races of white-crowned sparrow. The one that we get in the wintertime is Gambel, Gambelai, big breeding area up here, comes down here, but this is its range. Leucophrys, the one with the dark lures, over to the east. Oriantha, the ones of the inner west mountains, dark lures, and then the 2 coastal races have also pale lures. In the wintertime, Gambel's comes down into the valleys here on the west. That's one that we have here. And then Oriantha goes down into Mexico. Leucophrys, that was up here, goes down into the east, mostly into the southeast. And so in my mind, I was going, well, is it possible to get one of those here, these dark lured birds, these Oriantha, that are nesting here in the Central Valley, like in my backyard? And so I hate to say this, but I have for years been looking for a dark lured white-crowned sparrow in my yard, ever since in my 20s, and never saw one. I started talking to people. I'm going, what's the story with that? I mean, and I talked to John Dunn, who did a big paper with Kimball Garrett. They did a big paper on white-crowned sparrows in Birding magazine. And he says, David, apparently the Oriantha race of white-crowned sparrow shoots straight down the Sierra. Down when they leave, they don't go east or west. They don't go down slope. They apparently go straight down the spine of the Sierra and go down into Mexico. And that's why we don't see them away from there. In fact, there's only 2 records of Oriantha, or of a dark lured white-crowned sparrow, for the Farallones. So it just goes that they do not really move away from their range when they migrate south. And of course, Leucophrys, the ones from the east, well, that's a long way over here. And then one day in 2014, this bird right here showed up in my backyard. There it is. I go, oh my gosh. I got so excited. So we're talking just, 8 years ago. I was going, what? There it is. So here's a Gambel's. Here's the one with the dark lures. There's the close-up of it. I got so excited. I got John Dunn to see this bird. John goes, David, this might be a Leucophrys. I was going, what? And he said, because just the size, the bill was not quite as red. He thought that like a Oriantha should be. He said, this might be the first well photographed leucophares ever in California. The one of the east. I was going, wow, maybe. All I knew is it was a dark lord bird. And it spent the winter. I was real excited about that. It's something that will ever. And then all of a sudden now I'm looking for them all the time. This is kind of crazy. So since then I found 4 others. This one, a couple years later, I found this one wintering in our yard. About 4 years. I think it was about 3 years ago. This one was a classic Orienta. Had a nice red bill. The size, it was just a lot bigger. This bird was different from me. So this was a bird that wintered in my yard, and it was one of the Sierran birds. So again, just to say, white crowns is not all white crowns are not the same. I look at white crowns. I'm always going through white crowns like crazy. People are going, David, what are you looking at? I'm going white crowned sparrows. What are you looking at white crowned sparrows for? I want to find a dark florid white crown. I love gambles. I love white crowns just because it's a spark bird for me from when I was a child, but I also want to find a dark florid bird. And just something to do, just something to keep yourself busy and something that you can kind of brag about and drive your friends and family crazy with. So anyway, thank you.